Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Conversations from Being, inspired by the book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson. Join us each week with the intention of expanding your state of being, and your experience will be remarkable. Remember, this is a podcast about being. It is a podcast about you. To explore more deeply, visit theultimatecoachbook.com. Now, enjoy today's conversation from Being.
So, Karen, I'm so happy that you agreed to be a guest on the Ultimate Coach podcast, because I have followed your work a little bit, and I think that you will add a new dimension to our understanding of being. So welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. I'm honored to be here, Cordelia.
Yeah.
It's great.
One thing that intrigued me most about your section of the Ultimate Coach book was when you shared that the screen popped up for you when you were in a ACS training and Hardison was there, right? And so tell me about the screen.
Yes. So I had gone through 9 classes with Steve in his advanced client systems. And this was the last one, the 9th one. And Steve Hardison had come to speak at, I would say, maybe about half of those 9. And so I'd had many opportunities to be in the presence with Steve, and then also had another opportunity when I was part of Steve Chandler's, his M6 group, where he worked with 5 coaches over a period of 5 years. And so on one of those occasions, we went over to Steve's house and visited with both Steve and Amy. And I saw the studio and everything. I was very excited about it. And I knew as far back as 2014 and that was the first time that I had met Steve at one of the ACS, that was the very first ACS. I knew that I would eventually work with him. And each time when he came back to speak, Steve Chandler would kind of nudge me and say, "So are you working with him? Are you going to work with him?" And
interesting.
I was like, "Steve, you're my coach. I'll let you know." And so I was just waiting. I was waiting for that sign that, okay, yeah, this is the perfect time to go work with Steve. So I'll never forget this. I was sitting in the second row right next to my partner, Alex, and Steve was having kind of a coaching conversation with Alicia Dawes, who was sitting directly in front of me. And Alicia was sharing that she wanted to write a book, and Steve was coaching with her around that. And as I was witnessing this, I was taken back to a near-death experience that I had when I was 11 years old. And I won't go into all the details of the near-death experience because that would take more time, Cordelia, than I'm sure we have allotted. But it was an amazing experience, one that I have never forgotten. And I feel really privileged and honored that I had that experience and was able to come back. And it was during a time in my life, I was 11, that was very difficult. My parents were going through a divorce. My mother had paranoid schizophrenia, and she was slipping more and more into the schizophrenia. And I was feeling very unsafe, I think is the word. So unsafe and probably angry and not exactly certain how to express myself. over the emotions of what was transpiring inside of my home. And so I had this near-death experience, and I'd hit my head really hard after a fall from a tree swing. And so I had an out-of-body experience. I saw the light, very much like you read about if you've ever studied NDEs. And at the end of it, I had a choice to come back or not come back. And my choice was to not come back, because the feeling that I was feeling in that was far, far superior to what life was like on earth for me at that time. And I was shown this screen. It was like a big, big TV screen, bigger than any movie theater, huge, huge. And I was shown the story of my life going forward. But I didn't have the details when I came back. I just recall that it was so impactful, what was transpiring, that it was very important for me to come back. And at that point in time, after I'd seen that, I decided to come back. That was it. And so as I was sitting next to Alex, I saw that screen in my mind's eye as Steve was talking with Alicia. And I just immediately knew that I was meant to work with Steve, that now was the time. And so I didn't say anything to Alex. I didn't say anything to anyone else. And that evening, I went out with friends to dinner that were part of the ACS group. And Alex had gone back to the room because he wanted to get up early and go to the gym. And so when I went back up to the room, it was probably 10 or 11, and I just quietly crawled into bed, didn't say anything. He was already asleep. And then the next morning, I woke up straight up in bed, and Alex had already gone off to the gym. And I grabbed my laptop, jumped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and I wrote to Steve. And I wrote to Steve and told him I knew I could do that. I knew I could share with him, Steve, this is exactly what occurred yesterday. And this is where it comes from. And Steve was just on it. And I had a phone call that evening when I was on the airplane coming back when we landed. And he was just amazing. It was like I'd placed a 911 call and had jumped on it. And the other really fascinating thing, Cordelia, was Alex came back from the gym that morning, and I emailed Steve, and he said, "Oh, great. Are you going to work with him?" And I said, "Yes, actually, yes." And I said, "How did you know?" And he goes, "When we were sitting next to each other yesterday, as we were sitting, and when he was talking to Alicia, he just dropped in that you were going to work with him." I was like, "That's it. Yeah, you got it. That's exactly when it happened." And that doesn't surprise me. Alex and I are very energetically connected. And so it was just this absolute knowing that I was going to be doing this work with Steve. And a really fascinating thing happened, Cordelia. Shortly after I started doing the work with Steve, Amy had come to the studio at the end of our session, and she wanted to interview me, get more details for the book. And so we had this just amazing conversation. She's studied near-death experiences far more than I had.
Oh,
and
wow.
She sent me this book on near-death experiences. And so now fast forward a couple of weeks later, I'm reading this book, and never in my life had I ever seen this before, but story in the book where this woman describes her near-death experience And she describes this big, like massive TV screen. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Someone else has experienced what I had experienced. And so, yeah, it was just, it's just, there's so much more to this life than we know. And we're so much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for in terms of tapping into intuition, understanding energetically. I work with my clients on energy. I show them how they can move dowsing rods. I work with them with horses and show them how the horses, how attuned they are to energy and how they can teach them all around energy. Yeah, it's really fun. Really fun.
Thank you for sharing with us about your near-death experience and how that the energy and the wisdom of that moment has carried you through into your present. I find it so striking that, even your partner, it's almost like he lives in that other realm with you.
Yeah. He spent 13 and a half years in a Zen Buddhist monastery. And so, more than 10,000 hours, way more of meditation, both sitting meditation, walking meditation, working meditation. And so he's like the perfect partner for me in terms of how we energetically connect. And here's the other great thing. I met him in the ACS.
Of course you did. Of course you did. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love everything about that story. I do want to come back to the screen, not right now. I want to move into you and Alex
Sure.
being together, because I think that's the gem out of the story that you just shared, interestingly enough. So you met Alex through ACS. And for those who are listening and don't know what that is, that's Steve Chandler's Advanced Client School, right?
Yeah, Advanced Client Systems.
Oh, it is systems. Okay.
Yes. And he had it from January of 2014 all the way up through February of 2020, just before COVID. And then what he did is he moved it into his masterclass. So now he has the Coaching Prosperity School Masterclass. And many of us that were in the ACS for a long time are teachers in his masterclass.
Which is an online program now.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm so curious. How did you and Alex know that you were aligned to be partners?
Not at the beginning. So in the second ACS, I walked into the room. I sat down next to Jason Goldberg, who's one of my dear friends, and was chatting with him. He was sitting on my right, and then shortly before the program began for the very first time, there was a gentleman sitting to my left, and he had on a ball cap, and I thought he was like this young kid, and because he looks very young, and I think that's all the meditation. And so I turned to introduce myself to him, and instantly I knew that this was someone very different energy, and just this beautiful presence and softness to him. And he was hilarious because he was hanging on all of everything Steve was saying. And now this is my second one, so I'm starting to guess what Steve's going to say next, right? And there's Alex, and he's just nodding his head. Yeah, he's so excited. And that was so infectious, just absolutely infectious. And So I didn't think much about it and went out with some friends that I knew from the first ACS, and went to lunch. And I happened to see him as we were leaving to go to lunch, and he was sitting on a bench outside, and I invited him along, and he said he couldn't come. And again, didn't think much of it. The next day, I like to sit in the front of the room so that, I'm very engaged and paying attention, and as opposed to the back of the room. And so I was sitting over on the other side in the front of the room, and Alex was already seated, and he was sitting back about 4 rows. And he calls up and he says, "Karen, is that seat next to you, is that empty?" And normally I would have said, "Yeah, come on up," and instead it was like, "Yeah, come on, sit. I want more of that energy. Come sit next to me." and it was really cute. And so then the next thing was he had said, we were talking about meditation and guided meditations because I'm very curious. I was asking him all kinds of questions. And he said, "Hey, the next break, I'll do a guided meditation for you." And I said, "Oh, wow. Great." So the next break came, and he just he's out of there. He splits. And I'm like, "Where's my guided meditation? What happened here?" And so I didn't say anything. And then at the end, he said, "Hey, Karen, sorry, I missed you at the break, but if you'd like to do that guided meditation, let's do that now." And so I was like, "Great, I'm staying here at the hotel, and I had this great little patio. Let's go there." So we did the guided meditation, and I was like, let's see, "What would you like to know about my entire life?" was happening. I was like, "What is he doing to me here? He's telling me my whole life story." And, and what's happening? And we were there for about 90 minutes, and we were supposed to meet some friends for dinner. And we were late. They had already had dinner by the time we showed up. But he became a very, very good friend. And we were, texting. And again, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I had a series of really bad dates, and I was just like, I'm kind of over that part of my life. And he was great to have as a friend. I really, really enjoyed that. And there was just this innocence about him that was hilarious. And the last day of the ACS, I was getting ready to leave the hotel. I was at the front desk, and Alex shows up, and he's like, "Karen, I had a dream about you last night." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's a good come on line." And he was just so innocent. I was like, "Okay, well, I'm trying to catch my plane, so why don't we catch up on that dream later?"
You're like, "Whatever, man. Okay."
It was like Mork and Mindy. I was like, wow, okay. And so then fast forward. So that was September, October of 2014. And yes. And September, October 2014. And I had an operation in December of 2014. And I was supposed to just be overnight in the hospital, back home. It was right before the holidays, the Christmas holidays. And the procedure didn't go well. And I had all kinds of complications after that I should have never had, and ended up in the cardiac ward over the Christmas holidays for the 5-7 days, maybe. Somewhere between 5 and 7 days. And I didn't tell very many friends. My best friend back home knew, and Alex knew. And Alex only knew because he was texting me pretty regularly. And when he found out my situation, he was on it. And he was just, texting me and sending me music. And at one point he said, "Am I bothering you?" And I'm like, no, I am like a human pincushion here. They get me up every morning, take x-rays at 4 a.m. This is fantastic. It's the best thing happening for me right now. And he was just so supportive. And my girlfriend back home was so supportive. And it was a horrible and amazing experience all at the same time. And finally, I was able to get out. And it really was like that. Like, please let me out of here.
It sounds like they released you from prison.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so as I walked out, they have these doors that slide open automatically. And as I walked out and I stepped, it was like as if I was stepping across a threshold. And I had this thought again, just like the screen with Steve, just drop in. Oh my goodness. What would it be like to be with a man like that?
Mm-hmm.
And then that was it. I opened my heart and he knew. And it was just like the moment I opened my heart toward him beyond friendship, he just knew. And by February of 2015, we were an item, and it was really amazing experience. And if you ask him this story, Cordelia, he'd say, I was just contacting her. I was just staying in touch.
Maybe I need to have him on the podcast and get the other side of the story.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, what I love about your story is two things. You know, number one, with every seeming hardship, there's also ease in it.
Yes.
And the second thing is this reoccurring theme of thresholds and screens.
Yes. Right.
You know?
Yes. And listening, right? And listening, having this ability to be able to listen as those messages are coming. And everyone has this ability, and it's a matter of slowing down, getting present, and listening. And that's what we do as coaches. That's what I do as a coach, right? My document is I listen as the presence of love in every conversation. And that, what I mean by that is not only am I listening to my client, but I'm listening to my intuition. I'm listening for what direction shall I take this person in? What question shall I ask next that will lead in that direction? And so just by deeply listening and being very present, always practicing, that's one of the biggest things that I learned from Steve Hardison in this past year is always practicing, being in practice, no matter what your situation, no matter who you're with. And, you know, that led to some very interesting experiences in our coaching together.
So I hear that as heart listening.
Yes. Heart listening, you could say, yeah, as opposed to egoic listening.
Yes. Every time I'm with you, I feel that we're really together, like the back of our hearts are like touching, you know? So see, it like really touches me. So that's what it feels like. Would you expound a little bit more on how your presence has deepened in the year and a half that you work with Steve Hardison?
Oh, gosh. Let me see if I can sum it up.
That's another one of those big questions, right? Do we have 2 hours?
You're right.
At least.
Yeah. I mean, from my very, very first session with him, I skipped the be with because I just knew and, went for the whole tamale, right? I guess is that what they say?
I guess that's what we're going to say.
Steve, he sat me down in his office. First, you go to his home and he greets you and, would you like some water? What can I get you? And he talks to you about his studio, and then he takes you there, and we went on a little field trip. My first session. And Steve said that he had a dream the night before. He woke up and he called his next door neighbor and asked if he could have permission to bring me over to her house. And so we went on a little excursion over there. And I remember it was a really hot day, maybe 100. It was April, and it must have been 100 and something. And we went over, and unfortunately, her foundation at her house is falling apart. And you can see it from the back of the house that the structure of the house is beginning to collapse. And she's in her 80s, and it's just, my heart really went out to her. And so the whole time, Steve is using that as an analogy for how important our foundation is. And that without a really solid foundation, it's nearly impossible for us to grow at this accelerated rate. Because what happens is our crumbling base, or you might say our judgments, get in between us and our growth and the work that I was doing with Steve. And fascinating enough, Cordelia, I had the entire foundation of my own home redone, and about a year and a half prior. Wow. And I was in denial about my foundation. And it wasn't until I had decided to have them bulldoze my entire backyard because I was putting in my new sanctuary for my coaching studio. And my guy who was doing the excavation, Paul, calls me over on day one and says, Karen, have you noticed the cracks in your foundation? And I'm like, yeah. Like, you need to do something about that. Okay, Paul, I've been in denial. This has happened just like a year and a half prior.
Wow.
Right? Universe speaking to me. And then, of course, that's where Steve starts. And of course, I had the foundation. I had 26 piers put in, 26 feet down.
Wow.
And so completely redid my the structure of my home and backyard and such. So it was just, I mean, that's where it started, Cordelia. And like you said, we could spend hours going through all of, the creation of the document, the distinctions that I learned when I was with him. It was incredible. And I'll share one story that will bring this home. And that is that December 30th of last year, of 2021, we had a massive wildfire. I live in the suburbs. The last thing you would ever expect is a wildfire in December. But we had these Chinook winds that came in that were 115 miles an hour. And so from 6 miles away, an uncontrolled little fire became a massive wildfire and wiped out more than 1,000 houses.
Wow.
And so this wildfire was headed our way. And again, I'm out on the deck taking video thinking, oh, it's over there on Davidson Mesa. sending it, to my next door neighbor who was out of town. And pretty soon, my client from Germany is calling me and saying, Karen, I'm on the ski slopes with my daughter, but my wife just called me and your neighborhood is evacuating. I'm like, what?
Wow. How did he know? That's crazy.
His wife was talking to her friends who live in our neighborhood, and they apparently, but there was nobody that was an issue. No one got a call or reverse 911 or alarms or anything, nothing. But people got the word, and we started evacuating. And even as we're evacuating, I'm looking at all of my photo albums and thinking, should I take him? Should I not? And my kids were visiting for the holidays, and they're like, Mom, you got to get out. I'm like, okay, let me go down and turn on the sprinklers in the back. And, and Alex is like, are you sure you don't want to get to China? And so we're evacuating, and it was surreal. And I thought a couple hours went by, and we're all on our phones. And we had just gone to like a coffee shop in South Boulder that was about 6 miles away. But as we were driving there, I could see the flames, see the fire, see these neighborhoods burning. And that's when it really set in that, oh my goodness, this is really happening. But still thinking, oh, I'm going back to my house tonight.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're not. And so friends were all reaching out, offering spaces. We finally get to one of my friends' house, and we had 5 adults, one with COVID, 2 dogs. So we had to, make special arrangements. And it was just surreal. And I immediately went to my document, and there was a line from my document, I'm filled with a pure sense of inner peace. And I just kept repeating that to myself. I get chills now as I share that. And as we were watching on the news, and there was my neighbor 2 houses down, his yard was burning, fence, trees, a house behind us, 2 houses burned flat, 27 houses burned on my street.
Wow.
And I just kept repeating, I am filled with a pure sense of inner peace. And I remember the kids were like, we're so sorry. My daughter was like, I'm so sorry, Mom. I was rushing you. We didn't get anything, because it really looked like our house was gone. And I just looked at all of them. I said, you know what? I am filled with a pure sense of inner peace. Most important thing to me in all the world is right here in this room. And I'm fine. And I slept. I slept beautifully that night. It was amazing, because normally I would have been drawn into the drama of it, and I wasn't at all, not even. I was thinking, oh, I'll miss those Christmas ornaments, or,
Right.
I know I have some pictures, but I'll miss those baby pictures and things. But other than that, see ya. It's all fine. It's all good. I'm good. And I just I've never felt so clear that I was unattached to whether my house made it through the fire or didn't make it through the fire. What was most important was who I was being, my way of being in that moment.
That's a beautiful, example of true presence, Yeah. And what it really is to, it speaks to the volume of work that you had been doing, because where you had previously been in denial, even that day, and you had the crumbling foundation finally, you were a pillar of your own life, even as it was all disappearing and burning away.
And here I am, and we're back in our home. We had smoke damage, but it was all cleared up. I had the most amazing experience with my insurance, which I can tell you 90% of the people have not. And it was created through me with all my adjusters, every one of them. It was all created here and all created in my work with Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a testament also of, how you can create your life through how you're being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a beautiful story. And like, as you were telling it, I could feel, even the shift in your energy, when you chose to focus on that line in your document.
Yeah.
And you got really grounded and present with that. And you created being that. And the ripple effect of that, I think that could have even protected your home. It did protect your home, except for the smoke damage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a part of our fence that burned, and it came within a foot of my next door neighbor's house, burned, the whole side yard and mailbox, part of the roof. And so I don't know if it protected our house or not, but I really felt at peace with whatever was meant to be and what was to come. I was unattached to the outcome. I just knew that it was either way, it was all going to work out and it was all going to be fine. And that it was perfect timing, perfect wake up call for the world, that never before has this community, 2 cities, ever experienced a wildfire. And so we're getting wake up calls for the planet and how we live our lives, and that it's time to really become part of a change in the world.
Yeah. So where else have you seen this threshold of being the change in the world happening in your work?
In my work? Every day. Yeah, every day. I started this work back in 2007. I left corporate in 2006, and my mother passed in 2005. And as I stood graveside at her funeral, I could hear her again. This is one of those moments again where when you're deeply listening, you can hear. And my mother said to me, "When are you going to do something about this?" And I knew exactly what she meant. And what she was talking about was my life. Because I was living a life then that many of my clients live now. And it was a life of, superwoman, 60, 70 hours a week, with, the commute into the office, back home, and then 2 young kids, husband, and trying to do it all. None of it all that successfully, with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And so I thought, okay, she's right, that I need to do something about this. And so 2006, the company I was with was being acquired. It was perfect timing for me to leave. And now we see this repeated pattern of denial. Yes. I wasn't planning to leave, but I also wasn't planning to sign a 7-year non-compete. And so that came down to the last day, and I was a shareholder. Everyone had signed the contract except for me. And my CEO, I love her. She's amazing. But that day she gave me an ultimatum. And that day, again, the little voice was like, take it, take the ultimatum. I'm like, what? You're crazy. And I did it. I took the ultimatum. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Because I could just hear my mother, when are you going to do something about this? And a 7-year non-compete would tie me in. And I was like, can't do that. And so that was the day I packed up unexpectedly, completely unexpectedly, came home and sat at my desk in my office upstairs for a week and did nothing. Except go, what did I just do?
How great to do nothing.
That's not an exaggeration. Like, I just sat there like, what is going on? I've never been an entrepreneur. I don't know what I'm doing.
So we could say that was your jump start into meditation.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Yes, I did. I had already started meditating back in March of 2006. And that really supported me through a lot of this. So March 2006, July 2006. So I had been meditating for about 3 months. And I thought, well, the phone rang, like that, my phone's ringing. So I picked up the phone. It was a consultant who we had worked with back in 2004. And she said, Karen, I hear you're no longer at the company. Would you like to come and do some work with me? I'm like, absolutely. I'm just sitting here. And so that then started the journey of consulting. And then from there, I'd done some volunteer work, and one of the board members said, hey, have you ever done coaching? And I said what I said when I did consulting, no, but absolutely, I can do that. And I've managed 27 people. I love people. I'd love to do that. And so she introduced me to the CEO of a company where she sat on another board. And I started my coaching career and got every book I could possibly get my hands on around coaching. And then finally went to coach training school. And then in 2012, that's when I discovered Stephen Rich and the Prosperous Coach. And the rest is all history. And so, my whole purpose is really to bring more love, care, kindness, and humanity into the world through my service in coaching. And I'm very clear about that. And I deeply serve my clients that I work with. I love my clients dearly, all of them that I've worked with over the years. They're amazing. And so this is it, Cordelia. This is my home stretch. This is what I'll be doing for the remainder of my life here on earth. Yeah.
And it suits you so perfectly, Karen, I have to say. Truly. I mean, just being with you today and in previous conversations and in reading your new book with Alex, How to Get the Most Out of Coaching, it speaks volumes to how much you truly do love your clients, and you want all coaches to love their clients too. Yeah. I love reading that book because it helps me see who I'm being as a client.
Yes.
Which reflects directly on who I'm being as a coach, because if you're not a good client, how could you be a good coach?
Right. Exactly.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
So what prompted writing that book? Is it this love you have for coaching, or tell me more about that?
Well, the origin of the book was Alex and I, we take these morning walks with our dog Jax on the weekends. And we get up early, typically around 5, 6 in the morning, and we go out for a beautiful walk. And one day we're walking and Alex says to me, I really want to create something for my clients so they can understand how to get the most out of working with me. And I stopped in my tracks and I was like, Alex, that's brilliant. And guess what?
It's like you never thought of that.
Right? I'm like, and guess what else? There's no book out there like it because I've looked for it. And he was like, really? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, I was just kind of thinking like a little ebook. I'm like, no. This is big. This is huge. And so both of us had written books, right? I had co-authored a couple of books up to that point. He had written 4 or 5 books up to that point. And so for, I would say, a good year or so, we were both kind of pointing, okay, yeah, you write that book. Okay, no, you write that book. It's writing a book is a lot of heavy lifting. It's a lot of work.
I'm aware. I've written like 1 or 2.
And so it was like, okay, we're going to write this book. And so we started going to the coffee shop and we started outlining the book. And then in February of 2020, just before COVID, I had said to Alex, I said, we really should put a stake in the ground on the book and announce it to the ACS, don't you think? And he's like, that's brilliant. And so I asked Steve, I said, Steve, can we tell the room about our book? I want to get the reaction. And so we did. Steve gave us like 30 minutes to talk about our book with coaches, and they were over the moon. They were just like how I was when Alex and I were talking, like, oh my God, there's no book out there like that. That's brilliant. And so we knew we had to do it. COVID hit literally like the couple weeks later. And we looked at each other and was like, hey, this is it. Perfect time, perfect timing. Let's do it. Let's do it. And so it took a while, but we launched the book last September of 2021. So what was that? Like a year and a half at the point when we really got serious about the book. And very, very proud. Both of us are very proud of this book. It's our best ever.
It is. It's amazing. It is like the ultimate book about how to get the most out of coaching. It's so, I mean, it talks about stuff that I didn't even think about. It's kind of like the unconscious stuff underneath the layers of being a client,
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah. And it is the thing that was missing, where there's so much ambiguity around it that, you start with a new coaching client. They've never been coached before. They don't know how to even meet you halfway. Yet we want them to meet us halfway so that we can, help them, but they don't know how. And nor have they ever known how. And so that's what this book does, is it really helps them get clear about how they can show up to the coaching and get the most out of their experience. And we've made it really nice and short, 146 pages, so they don't even have to read a lot. It's just punchy, has lots of good ideas, tips, exercises, and there's even more to come, which I can't announce yet. But there's more coming.
Of course there is. There's always more.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for putting that gift into the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. So coming back to the screen.
Yes.
I feel like now that I know all the other things that I didn't know about you and your work and how you got to be here, I'm wondering how much of that screen is like a filter when you're working with clients. I guess my question here is about, do you have the capacity to also see into what's their life purpose? Not that you're a fortune teller or clairvoyant or anything like that, but I'll give you a little background of where I'm coming from with this.
Okay.
So it's my understanding that indeed our whole life does play before us when, it's the end of our life. And indeed we actually have seen all of it before we even come into our human form. And the gift is in the forgetting, because that's actually the meaning of human being, the one who forgets, right? So the fact that you began your life forgetting what you knew was going to happen, and then you got a little glimpse of it again, and you came back because of that. Oh, wait, I have a great purpose, a great work to do here, right? and then you forgot again. It's just in the forgetting, how do you, is that the enlightenment that you share with your clients, letting them know that the great part is all about the not knowing what you don't know? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's for me, and I can only speak to my own personal experience, is that I trust always that I'm guided. I trust always that I'm living on purpose. And that if something appears as a tragedy or a negative event, I know that beyond it is a lesson for me. I know that beyond it is something magical for me to learn as I experience this life. And so I only speak from my own personal experience. And as for my clients, they will all share with you that I'm deeply intuitive. And if you read any testimonials, they call me a divining rod. I'm so those things. And that's just from deeply listening and allowing that source to come through you and speak through you. And if anyone's ever sat with Steve Hardison, you'll see that he has become a master at this practice. And so I don't go much into my near-death experience or forgetting and the value of forgetting. But I do love the remembering. Mm-hmm. Because bits and pieces come and then you remember. Very much like deja vu.
Yeah, I love that. So I know now that you are complete with Steve. And how does that feel?
Well, interestingly enough, one of my clients, he's a coach. I've worked with him for 5 years. And at the end of my session with him yesterday, he said, "Karen, can I share something with you?" I was like, "Absolutely." He said, "I think the seeds that were planted in your work with Steve Hardison have only just begun to germinate. That I'm seeing those seeds sprout and grow, but I think they've just begun, that there's going to be massive growth here. You're going to be witness to." And that really resonated for me. It was beautiful for him to mirror that back for me, because that's exactly what I was feeling inside. That there was so much that Steve and I did together, and so many new distinctions that I learned in our time together, that it'll forever live inside of me and who I'm being in the world and the work that I do.
Yeah. See, like when you told me that you were complete with Steve, and I was like, maybe like you're not going to fly to his house anymore. And, there is no completion when it comes to working. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there is no completion. Yeah. It just continues to flourish and grow. And, it stays with you. It becomes part of your DNA at a cellular level. Truly, truly.
Yeah, I can feel that. I'm experiencing that. And I'm sure even people that, will be listening or watching this conversation, they're going to feel the ripple effects of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's what we want. That's exactly what I want, is for who I'm being to have a ripple effect on every person that I encounter. And there was one session where Steve and I, he'd mentioned a homeless small group of homeless people that lived under a viaduct near his home. And I said, oh, would you like to go see them now? And he's like, would you like to do that for your session? I said, yeah, let's do it. Again, it was a super hot day. He goes, do you want me to drive? I'm like, oh, fine, we can walk there. And so first thing he does is he goes through his entire pantry and pulls out all this food for them. And then we were walking. I said, oh my goodness, maybe we should get your book. And he's like, oh, great idea. He runs back to the house, gets his book. And so we went, and Alicia, who he had met before, who was living under the viaduct, wasn't there, but her boyfriend was there. And so there we are, crawling underneath, because it wasn't a very high ceiling. So we had to crawl underneath the viaduct to go sit with Ryan, her boyfriend. And I was just witnessing who Steve was being with Ryan. And it was amazing to hear him ask Ryan all these questions and to watch Ryan open his heart and begin to share and tell the truth. You know, there's a story in the Ultimate Coach book where Steve is having a conversation with someone who just escaped from prison. Yeah. And so, well, this was very similar. He's having this conversation with Ryan, and it was a profound experience. And then, of course, we ran into Alicia, and Alicia loves to read. And so she's reading The Ultimate Coach. And
wow.
I love it. You know, it was just such a beautiful experience, beautiful day, and such a wonderful example of who we can be every day as we practice who we're being with whomever, whenever, and that it's always a practice, and you're always in practice with everyone.
And, you know, it's almost like my last question was going to be, what else would you like to put in the space? And that story about Alicia and Ryan is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karen, for being here today. And I love who you're being and how you're changing people's lives and being a stand for heart-opening experiences.
Thank you. Thank you. And such a pleasure to be interviewed by you, the ultimate joy monger. You are.
Thank you.
I love it. But thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear from me and for me to be able to share my life and my stories with the rest of the folks that are listening.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this podcast with them. Also, we invite you to visit theultimatecoachbook.com so you can continue your personal exploration of being. There you will find links to join our wonderful community, get your own copy of the Ultimate Coach book, and more. Simply go now to www.theultimatecoachbook.com. That's www.theultimatecoachbook.com. The link is also available in the show notes. We appreciate your support. Be blessed. Be you.